Welcome back, everyone, to episode 7. So just to quickly recap, last episode we worked through quite a bit when it comes to sales and strategy, right? And so at this point in the course, ideally you're putting that sales strategy to work, you're bringing in customers, and you're finding revenue, and you're starting to get excited by all that money that's hitting your bank account. But also, I know from experience that excitement can also spark fear, right? Fear of uncertainty. What do I do next? That fear of feeling very reactive with this new revenue that's hitting your account. So in today's episode, we're gonna work through one of the most important strategies as far as building and scaling your business, and that's getting a grip on your cash flow. Okay, so cash flow is king. Not cash is king, cash flow is king. And having a handle on your cash flow is really the premier and first step you can take towards getting really confident in all of your strategic business decisions as you move forward. So what we're gonna do, first, I wanna take a pause and just take a moment to acknowledge where we're at, right? We've covered so much throughout this course, and ideally, everything we've covered has allowed you to focus more intently on business development, right? You haven't had to get bogged down in the weeds, sifting through Google, finding out all of this information because we've delivered that for you. So what we really want you to help you with is the term working on your business as opposed to just getting stuck working in your business. And this cash flow analysis is really gonna be a key component in working on your business and really putting together that forward-looking strategic framework so ultimately, as you're hiring, as you're growing, as you're scaling, you're gonna do so confidently. And so how does this all work? So when it comes to cash flow, we're primarily looking at the revenues you're bringing into the business, expenses you have leaving the business, right? And we're left with what's over is your profit. And so what I want to develop for you is a framework where every single dollar of profit you generate has a purpose, has a very specific purpose on where it's going to be landing within your business. Most of the business owners that I work with initially have that uncertainty feeling because it's very reactive. They're putting out fires all over the place, and it's really whatever's left in the bank account at the end of the day, they're happy with, and they're hoping that it just keeps continuing to grow. We're gonna transition from that very reactive feeling to a system that automates your process into the various business buckets that you should be having as a business owner that are absorbing that cash you're generating and ultimately putting each dollar into a very purposeful, specific destination to help you grow and scale your business. So what do these buckets look like? Well, I've put together a worksheet for you that you can go ahead and pull up. And ultimately, we're gonna walk through each of these ones very intensely, and we'll go through the specifics so that you can really get a good understanding of what they are and how they ultimately support your business. So the first bucket, of course, is your salary and wages, right? Of course, we started this business for a purpose, and that ultimately is to put some money back into our own pockets, along with, of course, helping all of the customers that we're serving. But we wanna be mindful of two things. Number one is making sure that the salary we're taking is appropriate, and two, that we're not forgetting that we're gonna have to pay taxes, typically on a quarterly schedule, going back to Uncle Sam. A lot of business owners forget that piece. You're now responsible for taking care of the tax payment on your own. And ideally, you're working with an accountant to help you through that process, but we're gonna make a reserve set up for those taxes so it doesn't catch you off guard. Now, one of the biggest fears amongst business owners that I work with is, am I taking too much from my business? Can I afford to take this salary without hurting my business, without sacrificing future growth opportunities? So one of the nice things about this bucket framework that we're gonna be developing is you're gonna be able to very clearly understand how the different buckets are factoring into each other, and ultimately that's gonna give you the confidence to draw the salary you know is right for your business and where you're at this time without sacrificing other opportunities. So what I want you to do before we jump into the actual buckets is go back and revisit where we talked about in episode 1, that 10-year forward-looking strategic strategy that you had for your business, right? Where were you gonna be? How much revenue are you producing in 10 years? How many employees do you have? How many offices do you have? What type of technology are you using? All of those things that are involved in your 10-year vision, where do you see this company going? Right? Because by having that North Star for your business, you're gonna now be able to start answering a lot of the questions around how much salary should you be taking? How much do I need in an emergency fund? How much money do I need to grow this business and really move it forward? And you really can't do that without having that North Star in mind. And of course, are you going to be exactly where you expected to be in 10 years? Likely not, but having that sense of direction is really going to allow you to move year over year in the right direction and ultimately move forward the way you should be. And it's going to help answer a lot of these questions that initially might feel overwhelming. So I know we talked about it in episode 1, but I don't want you to discount that forward-looking process. And especially if you have partners in your business, make sure you're both going through that, or all of you are going through that. You'll be surprised to see, if you expect the business to be doing $100 million in 10 years, but your partner only expects to be doing 40 million, obviously you're going to be rowing that boat at very different speeds in order to get there. So it's critical that you make sure you're on the same page and have that same vision for the long term of the company, because you won't be able to answer a lot of these questions without that North Star in mind. So now that you've reassessed kind of where you think the business is going to be in 10 years, let's bring it back to the buckets and how the buckets are ultimately going to help you get there. So going back to that first piece, we talked about your salary, right? That you're going to be drawing from the business. Now, of course, knowing how quickly you want to grow, you might be making a sacrifice early on. You might be limiting your salary. I've certainly gone through that process with my own business. Initially when launching, you make sure you have the reserves, again, as we talked about in episode 1, that runway, if you will, that's going to allow you to ideally take a smaller salary early on and then grow that salary as the business grows and those revenues are coming in. So now that you've accounted for that, you can really start to figure out what that percentage should be of each dollar of profit. And that's exactly what I want you to put into that green box that I've provided for you, is we're going to start plugging in the percentages that make sense for you. So of every dollar of profit, what percentage of that profit is flowing into these respective buckets? Okay? So the salary one, you're almost going to be backing into, and you can start to play around with some of the figures and you'll be able to identify what that salary is going to look like. With the emergency fund, a great target for a new business is trying to get 3 months of your typical expenses set aside into that cash cushion. Okay, so that's into your savings account, a nice, boring, sleep easy at night savings account. And so what I mean by 3 months of expenses, if your business is typically doing, let's just make the math easy, $10,000 a month in expenses, if you can get $30,000 set aside in that emergency fund as a cash cushion, that's gonna really help you sleep well at night, knowing if you have an off month, if revenue doesn't come in the way it's been projecting out, you're still going to be able to operate without getting into some sort of debt spiral where you're having to tap into a line of credit, utilize credit cards, basically borrow money, and ultimately end up having to pay interest. So that cash cushion will be really helpful in giving you that comfort level that you need. So I say 3 months is a great starting point. Depending on your business, I've worked with some customers who have really volatile cash flows. So ultimately, they try to get that reserve even higher, right? There's different times where they're waiting on accounts receivables, but they still have to make payment to their employees, their vendors, whoever they may be. And there's a cash flow mismatch. So a larger cash cushion really gives them peace of mind knowing that they're not going to have any worries as far as cash timing. Or, you might have very certain cash flow that you don't necessarily need to extend that. So of course, your cash cushion is going to be dependent on your own business and what helps you feel comfortable. But I think that 3 month target tends to be a really great starting point for new businesses like yourselves. So after we've filled that cash bucket, and I do recommend really filling that bucket as quickly as possible, we're going to move into the next bucket, which is the growth bucket. Okay, so the growth bucket is all about your future expansion with the business. So that's hiring new employees, making new capital intense investments. So whether that's property, that's new equipment, whatever really you need to grow and scale your business, that's the fund that's going to be there for it. And what you're doing there is you're setting aside specific cash reserves that then can be utilized for scaling your business. So you'll know now as you're going through your percentages, hey, if you're taking 70% for your salary and you needed 20% to fill that emergency fund, well, you haven't really left yourself a lot as far as future growth opportunity goes with that bucket, right? So you can start to see now as you're playing with these percentages and putting them into the different buckets, where different sacrifices have to be made in order to get the business to that 10-year vision that you spent that time really figuring out. Where do you want that business to be, okay? Now, the last bucket is the 401k bucket. And I really refer to this as pre-funding your exit plan, okay? And at this stage, it's not uncommon that you might not be filling this bucket yet, okay? So don't feel like you have to be putting money into your 401k. I'll be very honest with you. As a business owner, you are likely going to see more returns from putting that money back into your business, putting that money into the growth fund than you will by investing in something like the stock market, okay? Why, though, the 401k does become valuable, particularly as you start getting to a more place of comfort with the revenues, with the profitability, is because when you're running a business, statistically speaking, it may be unlikely that you sell the business, okay? So a lot of business owners have 80% or more of their net worth tied in their business. And what ultimately we want to do is give yourself flexibility, provide options. So down the road, if you have any trouble transitioning, which many owners do, I mean, the Exit Planning Institute sees studies of 20 to 30% successfully transition their business, right? So the numbers aren't good. So what you want to do is provide flexibility, give yourself options. The 401k is a really optimal vehicle in order to do that. So what you're going to be able to do as the business starts really generating profitability, where you're kind of at that comfortable point, is start funneling some money into that 401k. Really provide yourself the opportunity for an exit strategy in case you aren't able to sell the business. And in that case, what you're really just doing, again, you're giving yourself options, okay? So don't necessarily view it as diversification, opportunity in the stock market. I know those terms bore you as a business owner, right? Why would you want diversification in something you can't control? Why would you want to put money in something that likely has a lower return of putting money back into your own business? I get it. I've heard all of those objections, and I totally sympathize with them. But what you likely want to do with the 401k is just think of it as the optimal vehicle to give yourself options down the road if, when push comes to shove, selling the business is not in your cards, okay? So again, just options is what we're really trying to provide there. And at the end of the day, even further down the road, the 401k is going to be great because it's going to be an amazing way to recruit and retain talent. So ultimately, as you're hiring employees and you're growing your business, talent acquisition and retention is going to probably be one of your highest priorities and or problems. And the 401k will be a great vehicle in order to help with that process. So we covered a lot here. To recap, 4 primary buckets. We have your salary, which we're also accounting for taxes. Can't forget about Uncle Sam. We have an emergency fund, some sort of cash cushion that's gonna surely help you sleep well at night as a business owner in case there's ever an off month or quarter or year, right? If we ever hit some sort of recession, that you're gonna be really glad you have. The third bucket, again, is that growth fund. Anything that can be used to be reinvested back into the business, ultimately moving you towards that 10-year vision, helping you scale, helping you grow. And lastly is that 401k, that ability to pre-fund your exit plan, provide yourself options down the road if you need them. And you'll be glad that you did. You might not like it right now, but trust me, I've worked with enough business owners who have been very happy when it came to retirement that they had a nice cushion there to help them through that transition process. All right, so now what we've done, you can very clearly see that money is not just hitting your bank account anymore, basically as a slush fund where we're putting out fires hoping for the best, right? Now what we have is a very purposeful, very strategic game plan where every dollar you make has a purpose and is flowing into the right bucket. So as you're thinking about working on the business and really developing growth opportunities, scaling, building, all the things that you want to be doing as a business owner, this is going to be critical in helping you through that process. So I know this is a lot of information. Again, go back, revisit your 10-year vision, utilize the worksheet, make it your own, target the different percentages that make sense for you. Of course, this is just one of the small components that I work through with clients where I'm doing my consulting work with them, right? We've now hit the buckets. What then ultimately we're going to be transitioning towards is more of what we call an enterprise operating system, okay? So what you're ultimately going to be thinking about as we're moving forward is how does the business operate without you, right? It's more of the not working in the business, but working on the business. And that's really a big transition. you're getting to the stages of that part of the transition. These are the early times, exciting, but also very gut-wrenching times. And we're really excited to have you guys go through this with us so that we can take some of that fear away, ideally give you the empowering information you need to really feel confident about the decisions you're making. All right, in the next episode, at this point, now you have the revenue coming in, you know exactly where that cash flow is going. It's time to start hiring and thinking about scaling. So we're gonna be talking with an HR expert so that you have all the information you need in order to make sure you're making the right hiring decisions and you confidently can move forward with that next recruit. All right, we'll see you guys over there.